Who is the biggest bust in Raiders history? Former number one draft pick Jamarcus Russell has been known and labeled as one of the biggest busts in Raiders history and possibly even NFL history. But, ladies and gentlemen, there is a new challenger. Former head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, Josh McDaniels. Now, coaches typically don't get talked about as busts, but what McDaniels has accomplished during his short stint in Las Vegas has qualified him to be debated as the biggest bust in franchise history. Today, we will compare the legacies of both Jamarcus Russell and Josh McDaniels, and we'll let you decide which of them is the biggest bust that Raider Nation has ever endured. This video is not going to be completely negative. There is a human aspect to these two individuals who feel pain and criticism, and their families are the ones who are affected most. But we are here to cover the facts and figure out what happened for everything to go so bad for Russell and McDaniels. In 2002, the Raiders were in the Super Bowl. Since then, the Raiders have long been criticized as a franchise of dysfunction. There have been 12 changes at the head coaching position since that Super Bowl appearance in 2002, up till the firing of Josh McDaniels. Bill Callahan, Norv Turner, Art Shell, Lane Kiffin, Tom Cable, Hugh Jackson, Dennis Allen, Tony Sparano, Jack Del Rio, John Gruden, Rich Bisaccia, and Josh McDaniels. The desperation to win has made the Davis family make some questionable decisions. It was apparent that the iconic Al Davis was past his glory days back when he and his team won 3 Super Bowl titles in 1976, 1980, and 1983. Eager to win another championship burned so much within Al that he was making many drastic moves, from the coaching staff to the roster. But rather than helping accomplish the goal of winning another title, those moves, in hindsight, were setting back the franchise. On April 28, 2007, the NFL Draft took place. The Oakland Raiders earned the first overall pick after going through a tumultuous 2-14 season. Al Davis had first choice of the incoming top prospects, which featured Adrian Peterson, Joe Thomas, Patrick Willis, Marshawn Lynch, Darrelle Revis, Jamarcus Russell, and Calvin Johnson. Al Davis just hired 31-year-old USC offensive coordinator Lane Kiffin to be the head coach. It has been noted that Kiffin and his staff were pounding the table for Calvin Johnson prior to the draft, but Al was confident in his intuition and eye for talent, so he firmly selected LSU quarterback Jamarcus Russell, who was part of a Purple Drink Bowl, the Sugar Bowl winning team during his final season for the Tigers. Russell completed 342 passes for 3,129 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions that year. Only in hindsight can fans be critical of this pick, but scouts and media analysts were raving about Russell. Just take a look at these professionals.
He's overweight in my eyes, but you know what? I make the exception because sometimes when you're looking for greatness, you got to take a chance.
3 years from now, you could be looking at a guy who's certainly one of the elite top 5 quarterbacks in this league. Look out, because skill level that he has is certainly John Elway-like.
Mel Kiper must have been drinking something purple while comparing Jamarcus to a Hall of Fame quarterback in John Elway. As you can see, Al Davis wasn't the only one bent on the hype of Jamarcus. He was talented and a massive athlete, coming from a winning program under the tutelage of LSU head coach Nick Saban and offensive coordinator Jimbo Fisher. As we all know, student athletes who join and make it through Nick Saban's program are mentally tough individuals who form some of the best teams in college football year after year. Further, there is no coach at the collegiate level who has more players playing in the NFL. So the expectations for Russell were high. Thus, Mr. Davis chose the player whom many thought would alter the trajectory of a franchise. Jamarcus was going to be the savior of a 2-14 team that fielded Justin Fargas and Lamont Jordan at running back and Jerry Porter and Ronald Curry at receiver. They originally had Randy Moss, but he wanted out of Oakland, so the Raiders traded him to the Patriots before the draft for a 4th-round pick. After taking Russell in the 1st round, they took tight end Zach Miller in the 2nd round. On defense, the Raiders had Warren Sapp and Derek Burgess in the trenches, Kirk Morrison and Thomas Howard at linebacker, and Nnamdi Asamoah, Michael Huff, Stan Farrell, and Fabian Washington on the back end. Would you call that a welcoming roster for a rookie quarterback?
I mean, it's all right,
The team had lacked leadership ever since Rich Gannon slung the ball for the Silver and Black just a few seasons prior. Russell's arm talent fit the motto of what Mr. Davis has always built his teams on, an imposing running game and hitting the deep ball to speedy wideouts. But just when Raider Nation started to buy into the excitement, all hopes of this supposed savior being able to help the franchise started to crumble. Russell and his agent did not come to an agreement with Mr. Davis and the front office until week 1 of the regular season. He held out all of training camp and the preseason in order to get more money in his contract. That's not how you want to start a career, especially when you never played it down in the league. Fans started to doubt and become frustrated with Russell's approach. However, on September 12, 2007, he signed a 6-year contract worth up to $68 million, with $31.5 million guaranteed. At the time, NFL rookie contracts were much bigger before the new collective bargaining agreement. Now that the contract drama was behind him, Russell got to focus on ball. But Lane Kiffin was not going to rush Russell into action. He wanted to take it slow with him and allow Jamarcus the opportunity to learn without all the pressure of being a starting NFL quarterback. After all, the team went 4-12 that year, and when Russell got the chance to play, he finished his rookie season with 36 completed passes on 66 attempts, 373 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. After the San Diego game, Kiffin named him the starting quarterback for the upcoming 2008 season. Though the Raiders lost some notable players like Warren Sapp, Fabian Washington, Stuart Schweigert, and Jerry Porter, the hype started to build for the Raiders when Al Davis called in the Brinks truck in free agency and made a blockbuster trade in the offseason. He signed former Packers and Broncos wide receiver Javon Walker to a 6-year, $55 million contract that included $16 million in guaranteed money. He signed Gabriel Wilson to a 6-year, $39 million contract. He traded a second-round pick for Atlanta Falcons cornerback D'Angelo Hall, and then signed him to a 7-year, $70 million contract. He also signed Marcel Reese to the practice squad, where he would remain for the following 2 seasons. In the 2008 NFL Draft, Mr. Davis selected standout running back Darren McFadden in the first round. So the blueprint was being followed. Mr. Davis acquired speed and had a quarterback who could throw it farther than anyone in the league. The Raiders' season started off with a 41-14 loss against Mike Shanahan, Jay Cutler, and the Denver Broncos. Talk of Lane Kiffin's job security was at an all-time high, and there was constant media attention surrounding the team due to the conflict between Mr. Davis and Kiffin. Kiffin was confident in his abilities to coach the team, especially on the offensive side of the ball, just as Mr. Davis was confident in his ability to run the organization, even if that meant intervening in daily operations. Kiffin was not happy with his toes being stepped on by Mr. Davis, and it was all compounding into a great divorce.
I realize that you did not want to draft Jamarcus Russell. He is a great player. Get over it.
What's worse is that Jamarcus was in the middle of all of this drama. Not an ideal situation for a young quarterback to develop, and a stark contrast to the stable program Nick Saban ran at LSU. The Raiders would go 1-3 on the season before Lane Kiffin was fired and Tom Cable was promoted as interim head coach. The team finished the season with a 5-11 record, with an end-of-season victory over John Gruden and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In fact, 4 out of the 5 teams that the Raiders defeated fired their head coaches. The 2008 Raiders squad was dubbed the Coach Killers of the NFL. Would you imagine that? John Gruden getting fired due to losing to Jamarcus Russell, along with Herm Edwards of the Kansas City Chiefs, Eric Mangini of the New York Jets, and Mike Shanahan of the Denver Broncos, all losing their jobs. Jamarcus Russell completed 198 of 368 passes for 2,423 yards, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and 12 fumbles. Al Davis thought highly of his team and knew he was running out of time to witness them win another championship. He was aggressive in adding to his roster in attempts to make a run. He notably drafted speedy wide receiver Darius Hayward-Bay in the first round and hard-hitting safety Michael Mitchell in the second. Both picks were scrutinized by the media for taking those players too high. Another blockbuster trade took place on September 6, 2009, when Mr. Davis acquired Richard Seymour from the New England Patriots for a future 2011 first-round pick. The team performed miserably, finishing the year with another 5-11 record. In Week 11, Jamarcus was benched for Bruce Gradkowski. Gradkowski would pull out a victory over the heavily favored Cincinnati Bengals, throwing 2 touchdown passes, tying Jamarcus' season total at that point. In Week 13, Gradkowski led the Raiders to another victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers, completing 20 of 33 passes for 308 yards and 3 touchdowns. The win over the Steelers was a flashback of the classic battles of old between the black and gold and silver and black. The way the Raiders rallied behind Gradkowski showed that the team was not all that bad. Sure, the team was not star-stacked and loaded, but they did have some talent, and with inspiring play from a less-than-decent quarterback, it made all the difference. Things got worse for the Raiders when Gradkowski got hurt in Week 14 against the Washington Redskins. Jamarcus entered the game and performed poorly. so much so that Tom Cable named Charlie Frye the starter for the following week versus the Denver Broncos. In the Week 15 matchup, Charlie Frye kept the game close until being blown up on a blitz from a Broncos linebacker, which caused him to leave the game injured in the fourth quarter. Tom Cable was forced to put Jamarcus in the game when down 16-13. The Raiders' offense got locked up. The Broncos scored another field goal to make the game 19-13. The offense still couldn't make anything happen, but the Raiders' defense held strong for another drive, and then, with 3:29 left on the clock, Jamarcus led the offense down the field and threw the game-winning touchdown to Chaz Schilens. And guess who was on the other sideline to take the defeat? Josh McDaniels. That loss forced the Broncos to miss the playoffs in McDaniels' first year as head coach in Denver. Think about that. Josh McDaniels lost to Jamarcus Russell. Jamarcus was not the game-changing John Elway-like player that Mr. Davis and Mel Kiper believed him to be. He played in only 12 games and started 9 of them that year. He completed less than 50% of his passes for 1,287 yards, 3 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and 9 fumbles. A disastrous season was over. The writing was on the wall for the future of Jamarcus. This player was not living up to expectations and was being labeled a bust. If he didn't drastically improve, his career would be over. You would think that Jamarcus would have searched for help or put in a lot of work in the offseason to change the narrative surrounding him, but he showed up to camp looking like a defensive tackle, aka overweight, closing in on 300 pounds. Surely, this guy was not it. He had no awareness or care about his legacy. He seemed to be happy with his money, and that's all that mattered to him. He didn't put the work into being a professional quarterback, let alone an athlete. All this led to Al Davis swallowing his mistake and releasing the #1 draft pick on May 6, 2010. There have been 12 changes at the quarterback position for the Raiders since 2002 up till the release of Jamarcus Russell. Rich Gannon, Rick Meyer, Marquez Tuiasosopo, Kerry Collins, Andrew Walter, Aaron Brooks, Josh McCown, Dante Culpepper, Jamarcus Russell, Bruce Gradkowski, Charlie Frye, and Jason Campbell. Russell subsequently filed a grievance against the Raiders, asserting he was owed an additional $9 million from the team, and the party settled the complaints in 2013, with the Raiders paying Russell an extra $3 million. Al Davis dropped the ball, first by hiring a coach with whom he did not share the same vision, and second, he victimized his team by adding Jamarcus Russell to the historic franchise and being burned with one of the worst returns on investment in NFL history. Some would argue that the Raiders did not give Russell a fair chance from the jump, but good players generally shine whether they are on good teams or on bad. For example, Nnamdi Asamoah balled out for the Raiders' defense and was an absolute lockdown corner, excelling in man coverage. Quarterbacks feared throwing to his side, but that's for another video. On October 8, 2011, the great Al Davis died. The last coach that Al hired before his death was Hugh Jackson. From there, Al's son Mark inherited the reins and hired Reggie McKenzie as general manager for the 2012 season. McKenzie decided to fire Hugh Jackson and hire Dennis Allen, leading to interim coach Tony Sparano in 2014 and Jack Del Rio in 2015. In 2016, Del Rio, Derek Carr, and Khalil Mack led the team to its first playoff appearance since 2002. Carr got hurt in a Week 16 victory over the Colts and missed playing in the playoffs, which led to a quick exit for the Raiders. Del Rio led the team for one more season before Mark Davis dumped him for John Gruden. John Gruden stripped the roster and rebuilt the team in his image. In his fourth year, there were flashes of promise, but the league seemingly targeted Gruden and the Raiders by blackmailing him and forcing Mark Davis to relieve him of his duties as head coach after an email incident in which Gruden got caught in the crossfire between the NFL and the Washington Redskins organization. But that didn't stop the Raiders and interim coach Rich Bisaccia from rallying and impressively making the playoffs. The era of the Gruden and Mayock regime was a roller coaster of highs and lows. But Mark Davis decided to turn the page and start a new chapter. On January 31st, 2022, Davis hired Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler from the New England Patriots. McDaniels again was gaining popularity around the league as a future head coaching candidate, and it was perceived that he learned a lot from his past experience in Denver. He was fired there near the end of his second season.
I think he's ready. I think Josh has done enough to where he knows how he failed in Denver. I think he's more mature now.
Ziegler was talked highly of by front offices around the league and was favored by McDaniels to be his running mate as GM. A majority of Raider Nation was divided over the fact that the new regime was attempting to mold the franchise after the team that's blamed for their downfall, despite claims that they were going to build the Raider way. You would think that molding a failing team after a successful team like the Patriots is a good start. That was the logic of Mark Davis behind this decision. But the two men who are most to be credited with that success are Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, neither of whom was brought into the roles that resulted in nearly 2 decades of success for New England. But the new era was set in stone. McDaniels was given a 6-year, $60 million fully guaranteed contract and a second chance to redeem himself as an offensive genius and a coach who is capable of winning away from New England. The Raiders had a roster that was regarded as playoff ready. Derek Carr was considered the franchise quarterback, and this time, McDaniels made an initial effort to make the relationship work. When in Denver, McDaniels immediately fractured his relationship with Jay Cutler by attempting to trade for Matt Castle. But in Vegas, Ziegler and McDaniels made headlines by trading for Davante Adams, reuniting him with Carr. This trade won the hearts of Raiders fans, resulting in a boatload of hope that the 2022 season would be very exciting. The regime also added Chandler Jones to line up alongside Max Crosby, whom they re-signed to an extension. These types of moves signaled that McDaniels and Ziegler thought highly of the existing roster and that by adding a few more big pieces, their chances of making a run would be all but guaranteed. But the season was just the opposite. The final record was 6-11. Some of the losses were blown leads. Some of the losses were outright pathetic. The worst of the losses came from the Indianapolis Colts. McDaniels received tons of criticism for Las Vegas's Week 10 loss to a Colts team led by the debuting interim head coach Jeff Saturday, who was hired earlier that week to replace the recently fired Frank Reich, despite having no previous NFL coaching experience heading into the game. Saturday was coaching high school football the week prior. Despite the Raiders' loss, Raiders owner Mark Davis expressed his support for McDaniels the following day, trusting in Josh McDaniels' process. Another embarrassing loss came on December 6, 2022, against the Los Angeles Rams and Baker Mayfield. Matthew Stafford was injured, and the Rams were on a 6-game losing streak. Mayfield was claimed off waivers by the Rams from the Carolina Panthers. With only 2 days for Mayfield to learn the playbook and meet his teammates after he was claimed, the Rams started John Wolford at quarterback to open the game against the Raiders. Rams head coach Sean McVay benched Wolford after the first offensive series and put Mayfield in the game. The Rams were trailing 16-3 in the fourth quarter, but Mayfield led them on a comeback. The Rams offense took the field at their own 2-yard line. Mayfield then led the Rams to a game-winning 98-yard drive, which became the longest touchdown drive of his career. It was gut-wrenching and humiliating to watch the brutal blow. Something was wrong. It did not make any sense as to why the Raiders were losing games the way they were. In Week 15, McDaniels and the Raiders beat the New England Patriots 30-24, the first time since the 2002 season. In Week 16, the Raiders lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which was the final game Derek Carr suited up for the Silver and Black. He played poorly in the game, and McDaniels and Ziegler were hesitant to commit to him for the following year. In Week 17, McDaniels started Jarrett Stidham, and they put on a show versus the San Francisco 49ers at home. This game made a lot of people wonder if Carr was the problem all along. The offense was lights out against one of the best defenses in the league. The game went overtime, and the 49ers sealed the victory with a field goal for a final score of 37-34. All of a sudden, there was hope that McDaniels was the answer and that Carr was holding back the team. But then came the Kansas City Chiefs. In the season's final week, the Raiders got rolled by Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid 31-13. All the questions were back. What on earth just happened in the 2022 season? And what will Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels do to fix a team that was in the playoffs just 1 year before their inaugural season? The offense was ranked 11th in yards and 12th in scoring. Derek Carr completed 305 of 502 passes for 3,522 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. Though the stats were similar to his previous year under Gruden, his tape showed significant flaws. Was it McDaniels' fault? Or maybe just too many offensive systems that fried Derek's brain on information overload? Josh Jacobs earned the league rushing title with 1,653 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns, and adding 400 yards through the air on 53 catches. Davante Adams caught 100 passes for 1,516 yards and 14 touchdowns. Darren Waller was injury-plagued throughout the year and underwhelmed the expectations of what tight ends typically accomplish in the Patriots system. Max Crosby was one of the few bright spots on defense. He led the team with 89 tackles, 12.5 sacks, 22 TFLs, and 3 forced fumbles. But the defense was ranked 27th in yards allowed and 25th in points allowed. So the thought process entering 2023 was adding more resources to the defense and finding a way to improve the quarterback position. But that did not happen. McDaniels again fractured the relationship with the quarterback. Derek Carr did not appreciate the way he was treated as one of the longest tenured players on the team. They tried to trade him, but couldn't because they gave him a no-trade clause in the contract the previous year. So they released him, and he signed with the Saints. Rumors started to spread that Davante Adams was unhappy and wanted to leave, but that proved not to be true. Davante was frustrated with the results of the season, and he did ask for the team to consider signing Aaron Rodgers in free agency, but Ziegler and McDaniels instead signed Jimmy Garoppolo to a 3-year, $67.5 million contract. They also added Jacoby Myers to a 3-year, $33 million contract, and on smaller deals, they added Brian Hoyer, Austin Hooper, DeAndre Carter, and Philip Dorsett. McDaniels knew that the offensive line was in need of assistance, but neglected that position group. He also knew that Patrick Graham and the defense needed help, but the effort to help that side of the ball seemed lackadaisical compared to the offense. Robert Spillane was a solid signing. The former Steeler is a lunch-pail linebacker and has been a building block for the team. Aside from him, only a little help was added. They drafted Tyree Wilson in the first round. Some have been quick to label him a bust, but the front office knew that he had a foot injury and would not be able to participate in training camp. Ziegler has pointed out that the previous regimes haven't done well with drafting and missed a lot of picks. It would take time to get where they wanted to be, but if you recall, in their initial introductory presser, Mark Davis, McDaniels, and Ziegler denied that this would be a rebuild.
Now we're just moving to the next level. It's not a rebuild, it's not a reload, it's just taking this to the next level and getting to that Super Bowl and winning some championships.
Going into 2023, the way Ziegler and McDaniels structured the cap spending was questionable. They spent $100 million on offense and $50 million on defense. You would think that someone who is respected in the league to be an offensive genius would do more with less on his side of the ball, that he would give more resources to the other side of the ball, or at least keep the spending balanced. But looking back, McDaniels seemed greedy, and yet, as the season progressed, the offense struggled greatly. The Raiders opened the season with a win against the Denver Broncos, but then lost 3 straight to the Bills, Steelers, and Chargers. Mark Davis told fans to smarten up during the Chargers game, standing by McDaniels, even though deep down he knew that it wasn't working. They turned in 2 wins against the struggling Packers and Patriots, but then lost 2 straight against the Bears and Lions. Patrick Graham's defense with Max Crosby was outplaying Josh McDaniels' offense that had a boatload of weapons. After the Bears game, Mark Davis saw enough. Surely, McDaniels was not it. He had no awareness or care about his legacy. He seemed to be happy with his guaranteed money, and that's all that mattered to him, along with his process. He really thought that he had all the time in the world to one day become a winning team, and didn't understand how to lead a locker room of men. All this led to Mark Davis swallowing his mistake and firing the regime. On October 31st, 2023, Josh McDaniels was fired, as was Dave Ziegler and offensive coordinator Mick Lombardi. Antonio Pierce was promoted to interim head coach, and the performance of the team improved immediately. The culture in the locker room could be felt and seen. The players were empowered to be involved in the game plan and started to have ownership of their season. It was clear that McDaniels had zero awareness of what was going on internally. He did not understand how to make adjustments. He was naive to the effects of his own decisions and how the team would respond. His play calling was predictable, and he was so infatuated with anyone who came from New England. The positives that McDaniels brought to Las Vegas was giving fans hope by bringing in Davante Adams. But other than that, what would you say that he did positive? Tell us in the comments. I believe one of the key moments that McDaniels lost the locker room was when he decided to start Brian Hoyer Week 7 against the Chicago Bears in place of an injured Jimmy G. Instead of giving Aiden O'Connell a second chance to showcase what he could do, he stuck with Hoyer, while the Bears gave the start to their backup quarterback Tyson Bagent, a rookie Division II quarterback from Shepherd University. The players and true fans were the only ones who understood just how talented this roster really was, but McDaniels sabotaged what could have been. It is truly sad that these past 2 years were essentially a waste of the prime years of players playing for greatness. Guys like Max Crosby and Davante Adams put their bodies through hell to help make their team champions, in football talk at least. In life, they are winning and making millions of dollars. But that is where the fine line of treating football only as a business causes to lose sight of what football is all about, winning and having fun while doing it. We wait to see what Mark Davis decides to do next. Who would you like to see coach this historic franchise? And finally, who do you think is the biggest bust in Raiders history? The Raiders have always been one of the most iconic franchises in the NFL. This detour has been long and rough, but let's hope that success is pretty close, because when the Raiders are winning, it makes the NFL better. Just win, baby. If you enjoyed this video and would like to help us, we only ask that you like the video. If you want more content like this, we welcome you to subscribe. Thank you for watching The Halftime Show.